Okay, today what I got for you is combining the uh, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street timelines because they end up meeting in Freddy vs. Jason. So, let's get started here. Seeing as the first, I think, four uh, Friday the 13th movies came out before Nightmare on Elm Street 1, um, those are going to be the start of our timeline here. Yeah, because Nightmare 1 is 84. We have 80, 81, 82, and 84. So, let's get started here. Up first is going to be Friday the 13th. Um, I should also mention that I'm going to take into account that these might have a multiverse because there's a Friday the 13th and a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. And as was the case with Spider-Man, I'm going on the assumption that that implies a multiverse. It's never been confirmed, but that's what I'm leaning towards because that is how it feels it should be. So up first is either version of Friday the 13th Part 1. Um, and yeah, that will be the start of our timeline. Freddy doesn't exist at this point, nor does he exist in Part 2, where Jason is properly introduced, although he doesn't get his iconic ski mask until the next movie. But here we have him wearing a sack over his head and going on a rampage. Then, a year after the events of that movie take place is Friday the 13th Part 3, and this can be either 3D or 2D, but even the 2D version kind of looks like there'd be 3D gimmicks, so there you go. And then um, next up, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have the Freddy's Nightmare series take place because it seems as though this series takes place leading up to A Nightmare on Elm Street 1. And then we'll have, or before Nightmare on Elm Street 1 takes place, we're going to have the events of Friday the 13th 4 take place. And let's see when this one came out. Oh, this one's also 1984. Okay. And then we'd have Freddy debut or make his movie debut with Nightmare on Elm Street 1. Hang on, I'm gonna check something real quick because I'm wondering if this has release years for the movies. It does not appear to, so I'm gonna have to look up when each movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise came out. So I'm going to pause this right here for a few minutes. You won't even notice because it'll just pick up right here. So I'll be right back. Okay, so Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is 1984, and then Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is 85. So let's see when Nightmare or Jason 6 takes place here. Looks like that's going to be 86. So next up in the timeline would be Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And then following the events of that comes 1986's Friday the 13th 6, Jason Lives. Um, Now, there could be some connective tissue throughout these movies that are like, oh yeah, these guys know of each other. So they'll still take place in their two separate places, which I think is Illinois and New Jersey, but they will have um, events that take place at the same time, just in different parts of the country. Let's see, 88. Hang on, I'm going to consult the list again. Okay, so happening next is Nightmare on Elm Street 3 taking place in 1987. And then after that, we have taking place at the same time is Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and Friday the 13th 7. And both take place in 88, whereas Dream Warriors Nightmare on Elm Street 3 takes place in 87. 88 is Nightmare on Elm Street 4 The Dream Master, as well as The New Blood. So that is where we're at here. And then, let's see, this one is 1989. Is there a Freddy movie that takes place in 89? There sure enough is a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that takes place in 89, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. So these two are happening at the same time. Jason here is taking a boat to Manhattan and going on a short rampage in Manhattan, not actually taking it over like the title would imply, which would be something that would make sense given the title, but anyway, moving on. This one, 1993. Please hold. Okay, so taking place in 1991 is Nightmare on Elm Street 6, The Final Nightmare, Freddy's Dead. And then following on the coattails of that is 1993, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, but it wasn't The Final Friday because there's Jason X and the reboot. So here we go. There is what we're going to do there. And then either cut because there's an unrated and a rated. And then let's see. In 1994 is the weakest movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now I call that one the weakest of the bunch because, one, while it does star Robert Englund, it's kind of a requel of the original in a way, but set in the real world instead of the Nightmare on Elm Street location. So it pales in comparison to the rest of the series for that reason. And Robert Englund is not the main Freddy in the movie. They call him Real Freddy, Reel. And it just kind of, it's a Nightmare on Elm Street, an Elm Street movie, superficially. And then up next we have, set in 2002, we have Jason X, it's not set in 2002, but it released in 2002. So we have 2455 being the year it takes place in, and it's actually pretty good. So yeah, that is all I have to say about Jason X. The disc looks pretty cool. I'll show that in another video. It's kind of like this a little bit, but yeah. And then in 2003, the two franchises collide with Robert Englund and who plays Jason in this? I don't know. Anyway, the two worlds collide in Freddy vs. Jason, and it's a bloody and trippy reign of terror, and I really like this movie, so there you go. Then the first franchise to get a reboot is 2009's Friday the 13th, and I've only ever seen the extended cut. Yeah, the extended cut. I've never seen the theatrical cut because my DVD only had the extended one on there. So, pretty soon I might be watching the theatrical cut just to see what all is different, and I might, after finishing it, watch the extended version so I can be like, oh yeah, that's different. Oh yeah, that's different too. But given that this is a reboot, That implies, in my mind, multiverse. Okay, so with that reboot now in the books, implying a multiverse, we have Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, now starring Jackie Earle Haley, who actually did a really good job, in my mind at least. And this has two notable DC television actors in, and those are, where's her name? Katie Cassidy, aka Laurel Lance in Arrow, and Kyle Gallner, aka Impulse in Smallville, aka Bart Allen, aka kind of the Flash, sort of. They called him Impulse, which is actually Barry Allen's son in the Arrowverse. But yeah, there you have the Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th timelines combined. In my mind, it makes sense because of Freddy vs. Jason to have them in the same franchise, same universe, taking place in different states and different cities and all that. One of them not even in a city, in the middle of the woods, obviously, because Friday the 13th takes place in the woods at Camp Crystal Lake, New Jersey. So, there you have it. Hopefully, you enjoyed this blending of timelines. And do you agree that this would make sense if they were combined like this? And would you have been interested in seeing a sequel to this movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, and having it be a PG-13 Freddy Krueger movie? I personally would have loved that idea, or the idea of a PG-13 Nightmare on Elm Street 2 Return to Elm Street. Um, so that would have been personally really cool, I think. And before I get going here, let's just look at this awesome picture diorama of uh, the Friday the 13th Deluxe Edition Scream Factory collection. The artwork looks incredible. Not beautiful because it's one of the ugliest characters in horror, second only maybe to Freddy Krueger himself, because he is hideous under his mask, as you can see right there. So, is is Jason technically a zombie? I think so. Anyway, that is it for this video, and see you in the next video.